Good Thursday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. The Browns getting after it with their search for a new defensive coordinator. Yesterday, it was Jim Schwartz interviewing. Today, Brian Flores, former head coach of the Miami Dolphins, is in Berea for the interview process with the Browns defensive coordinator position. Some of the beat reporters from the Steelers say he will have other opportunities as well. Will be interesting to see. One thing about Flores, his defenses in Miami were very good. Take a listen to this explanation of what they did well.
In 2019, Miami's defense was dead last in the NFL by DVOA. In 2020, the Dolphins jumped to 11th overall and 6th in pass DVOA. They went from giving up 35 points per game to just 21. All this improvement was spurred by the fronts and pressure packages from Brian Flores and great secondary play from Xavier Howard and new addition Byron Jones. Miami had one of the highest blitz and pressure rates in the NFL, with almost 10% of their blitzes coming from a cover zero look with no deep help. They also brought 5 or more rushers on over 1/3 of their defensive snaps. They weren't without flaws, especially in the run game, but the defense came up big without the big names to back it up. The Dolphins took double mug schemes and ramped it up to the max with their cover zero overload looks. While they only ended up blitzing and being in a true cover zero about 10% of the time, that didn't stop them from showing cover zero and bailing out of it. Cover zero means there are 0 deep defenders. Everyone is at the line of scrimmage and in man coverage. It's a high risk and high reward defensive scheme, and Flores was really unfazed by the risk it brought. He would run it in 2-minute drills at the goal line and in some critical moments during games. The Dolphins are in one of those cover zero looks right here. The secondary outside are all in man coverage. The Dolphins coach their guys to engage as much as possible with the offensive linemen before they bail to their coverage spots. This forces the offensive line and protection schemes to engage with them and open up lanes elsewhere. If they have free releases and aren't picked up on that initial step forwards, they have the clear to continue on their track and attack the quarterback.
Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier, host of Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, you saw that look where you got the 3 defensive backs. I can easily envision Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, and Martin Emerson in that, and kind of turning everybody loose. I think the players love playing in that system because it's aggressive and it shows a trust in them.
Yeah, the one thing I do worry about with all the, because I like Brian Flores as well, but the one thing I have to keep an eye on is whenever we replace a coach, right, there's this tendency to want to go in the extreme opposite direction of the guy that was just the coach previously. And I worry that we might be going too far in that direction because, on paper, going zero coverage, zero blitzing a lot, that sounds fun. But in theory, it gives you a lot of the same issues that you were worried about with the Joe Woods defense, just in a different way. Because what's a zero blitz that gets beat? It's a blown cover. It looks like blown coverage. It's a big play that you're giving up, right? So, that's why I worry about Martin Emerson, somebody who needs overhead coverage in order to be the corner that he is. He's not really a long speed guy. If you look at the tape when he was covering against Devonta Smith, he got cooked deep intermediate right by him. So I like Brian Flores. I would hope that he tones down some of the aggressiveness. I know nobody wants to hear that because all we want to hear is the opposite of Joe Woods. But the opposite of Joe Woods, the inverse of Joe Woods, does not mean that he's going to be good automatically just because the philosophy is different. So that's what I will worry about, right? Because, yes, that's going to make people happy in the short term. They blitz. But if we get to week 8 and we blow a game because we zero blitz like he did in Miami at the end of the first half, and give up 7 free points, I don't think we're going to be that's just the risk that we run when we run cover zero, right? The same way we weren't hey, sometimes we might give up a 3rd and 7 because we run a lot of zone, but we're going to stop big plays, right? You know what I mean? It's the what you have to take is not going to go in if the defense isn't performing. And I would just caution people on that. Zero blitzing sounds great on paper, but a lot of people in the league go, you really shouldn't zero blitz that much. And that was one of the big criticisms of Brian Flores that I hope he changes, because We can't live zero blitzing like that. Like, that's going to be dangerous for a team with something to lose. And also remember, the Miami teams had nothing to lose. They were actively trying to lose. Like, that's part of what the lawsuit was. So, yeah, he was zero blitzing and doing whatever he wanted because, one, he didn't have the talent, and two, what else? Like, why not, right? Like, this is different because if you zero blitz this year and cost the game this year, everybody's getting fired. So different scenario. I hope would call for different philosophy. He's not going to be as aggressive as he was in Miami. I don't anticipate that. But also fans should probably not want that because, yes, we're going to want to go in that opposite direction. I don't know if going all the way over there does anything but keep us in the same carousel we've been in for the last 20 years.
All right, but they got to be more aggressive than they were. I mean, you've got speed.
Absolutely.
I mean, they just were not. They were. I would say they were passive.
No. They can't live rushing like 5 and calling that a blitz, right? Like, that's not what they can live doing anymore. They have to be more aggressive in certain situations. They should let them play more man, but we don't need to go into the excess of that conversation, which is where Brian Flores kind of dipped in Miami. So that's why I'm saying, like, I think he would be different here because it's a different situation, but also it's something to look for because right now we're looking at him being in the excess in that conversation is a good thing. But it's not really, right? Like, so it's just a good thing in comparison to Joe Woods, who was the exact opposite. So we got to see where he would line on that.
All right, perspective there. I get it. This is kind of interesting. This is a look at what his defenses did in Miami. So 2020, they had 29 turnovers. They forced 29 turnovers. That was first in the NFL. 2.6 sacks per game, tied for 8th. 2021, 26 turnovers, tied for 8th in the NFL, 2.8. Sacks per game. So, and again, they went from the worst defense the year before he took over to pretty much middle of the road, which if the Browns defense was middle of the road, we'd be getting ready for a playoff game.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, more perspective here. We did this with Jacoby Brissett, and that didn't exactly yield the same yields once Deshaun Watson got in there, right? So it's not necessarily a one-to-one kind of thing. But the ideal is, and look, here's my philosophy for this entire defensive coordinator search, for those of you who care. It's not going to take a genius to get a good defense out of this team. All right, it's just going to take somebody who, one, the players are willing to listen to, and that's going to be anybody not named Joe Woods. Joe Woods is not in the building, so you're probably going to get better because of that. And, like, that's no disrespect to Joe Woods. It's just after 3 years of, like, the same thing, people are just going to tune you out. Like, that's just what happened. And, you know, anybody new that comes in there, you know how it is when somebody's new at work. You kind of listen to them for the first, like, year. And then, like, you know, if they're not good, then you stop listening to them. So it's not going to take a genius to come in and fix this defense. It's just going to take somebody competent. And competence is not that rare to find on the defensive side of the ball. And as long as they have that, they should be fine.
So another one of the candidates, one of the younger candidates that the Browns have asked and got permission to talk to is Gerard Mayo. Now, Mayo, the Panthers have asked to interview him for their head coaching job, so he may not even make it here to get to that. So let me ask you this, Quincy. Of Schwartz, Flores, Mayo, and Desai, those are the 4 that we know. There will probably be others that they don't have to ask permission for that we find out are going to interview for the defensive coordinator's position. But of those 4, who do you like? Do you have a favorite? I do, and I'll give it to you again. But of those 4, who do you like?
I imagine Motor City is like, hey, let's go get Brian Flores, right? Like that's the most recognizable name. That's the most notable name. I like Brian Flores too. I think he provides a lot of what this coaching staff needs, you know, a different perspective in there. I would also like Gerard Mayo. I wouldn't rule him out, right? Gerard Mayo, very qualified for the position. 3 years now, linebacker coach in New England is kind of like pseudo defensive coordinator, but not because Bill's really the defensive coordinator, but you're his most senior lieutenant on the defense. It's a weird role. He should probably change the name of positioning for like his own like tree's sake, but that is something that comes there. Now, the success of Belichick tree guys outside of the Belichick tree system is something that does concern me with both Mayo and Brian Flores, even though Brian Flores has demonstrated some success outside that system. I think that's why a lot of people are more comfortable with him. I don't know much about Sean Desai. And Jim Schwartz is interesting because it wouldn't require much of a personnel change, more of a mindset change, which I'm fine with, right? That would be more of a philosophy change, where Joe Woods has the same kind of like 4-2-5. We're going to run a wide 9, some base, but we're really going to be in a lot of nickel and dime. It's the same kind of ideal, but the philosophy is different. So if this was offense, it would be the same kind of conversation where you would have versus Air Coryell offense versus like an air raid offense, where some of them are downfield, more attacking, some of them are heavy screen, right? Cliff Kingsbury runs a very different air raid than what like Urban Meyer ran at Utah or something like that, right? It's a difference. It's the same name, but it's different in philosophy. The difference with Jim Schwartz would be he loves to put his focus on the interior and the edges of the defensive line and build out from that. That's exactly one of the things I was wanting, right? Former head coach, has a lot of perspective. I would like him too. I don't think there's a lot of room to go wrong here. So I think there's just multiple good decisions you can make here.
I like Schwartz. I think they need somebody that's, and I don't know Flores' personality enough. You need a counterbalance to an even-keeled Kevin Stefanski, I think. And we'll have more on that here. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I was looking at the Bengals, the road to the Super Bowl, and I think the one thing that was noticeable was, one, how they attacked the offseason. As far as personnel, I think we just need to find offensively a speed receiver. We need a Jamar Chase or a Tyreek Hill, like player that's going to be reliable for Deshaun. Also, the defensive side, Bengals have a great defensive coordinator in Lou Anarumo. So I think we really need to hire a defensive coordinator who has authority over a locker room. And I think Brian Flores is definitely one who has authority over a locker room. So I think he'll be a great candidate. Short, I think he will also be a great candidate, but I think Brian will pull something out of our young football players, and I think that we really do need him.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. I think they need a different personality. I think Woods was too much like Coach Stefanski in that he's kind of laid back and even-keeled. And I think they need somebody that if something happens, they're going to go in and throw the table over in the meeting room and turn it upside down every once in a while.
Well, I think it's about different approaches too, right? Like, I'm not necessarily going to endorse somebody like having a full-out temper tantrum because I think that's more dysfunctional than it is helpful. But I do think that there are different approaches and guys who can get to guys in different ways and connect with guys in different ways that maybe Joe Woods was not able to, maybe Kevin Stefanski is not able to, and maybe Mike Prefer is not able to. Like, Stump Mitchell might be able to connect with some players, but at the end of the day, Stump Mitchell's a position coach, right? It's different when there are the senior leadership, right? The head coach, the coordinating staff. So that there, you probably need a more of a diversity in approaches there with player relationships, which is why Brian Flores seems to be really good at that, right? That seems to be something that the guys respect in there is Brian Flores. So maybe he could bring something to the table in that. Now, I don't know if he's necessarily Mr. Scream It and cuss guys out. Like, he's not Greg Williams, right? Like, he is somebody who is demonstrative. He is passionate, but I don't think he's a destructive guy, right? He's not going to be, just tearing down guys. That's not how he rolls with it. He will say some things, but he's not necessarily going to be cussing guys out in the sideline, things like that. But most good coaches aren't that way, especially nowadays where you can be mic'd up and everything else like that. So, it's about a different approach, right? Maybe Kevin, in his confidence and his kind of calm and confident kind of demeanor, maybe that doesn't work for a player. Maybe a player needs to have a more direct approach with them, right? When it comes to language and how they're talked to. Maybe that is something that can help. Well, now you have somebody on senior leadership that can do that, at least for one side of the ball, or challenge guys in a different way. And I think that is important, right? I think being able to reach as many people in the locker room and many different personality types in the locker room, that's what's important. And that's what you can do if you hire somebody who's outside of that. Now, again, I don't know enough about Jim Schwartz or anybody else in this thing to decide that. We kind of made that determination about Brian Flores. I don't really know Brian Flores like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're just kind of making assumptions here. But that is something that when they're going through the interview process, that they should really, really consider is, hey, does this guy have different approaches than me? And how can that be helpful to this locker room? Because maybe we need more approaches to more players, because clearly that's been a problem. If people don't feel like they can communicate things and then they're lashing out to the media, and this has happened multiple times the last couple of years, then you don't have enough approaches in that building to be able to handle the problems that are being manifested in it.
Yeah. The one thing is they got to get the principal too, because right now the players told you we need somebody that's going to hold us accountable. So Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talk a little bit about wide receivers. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yeah, hi. This is Ron from Cleveland. Today I wanted to just talk about Barry and Stefanski's news conference. In my opinion, it was a sham. It was them trying to convince all the Browns fans that going from the playoff to losing games to following year to losing games more is cool. And we're right on the verge of being a Super Bowl team. As long as he keeps Kevin in there. Yeah, Kevin's a great guy, seems to be very articulate. Maybe him and Barry are great chess partners, but when it comes to running a football team, nah, he's not the guy. There's no fire there. I don't think he even looks out when the team's out there on defense. And to me, until we find a good coach, and we'll probably find out next year, I just feel like a Stefanski and even Barry, as long as they're here, we're not going to see the promised land. That's my opinion. You don't have to agree with it if you don't want to. I'm sure a lot of people don't. But as always, love the Browns, love your show. Go Cleveland, woof.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Quincy, it's kind of interesting. 2 disappointing years in a row have really created a divide as far as the way the fan base feels about Kevin Stefanski. And maybe unfairly so. Again, I think he deserves another year, and I'm pretty confident they're going to get things headed in the right direction.
Well, it's funny, right? We talk all the time in Cleveland that we want to be like every other team in its division, right? We want to be like Pittsburgh. We want to be like Baltimore. We want to be like Cincinnati. Why aren't we there? Why did they hop us? Well, we don't want to make decisions like they would make it, right? Like every time it comes down to it, we want to fire the coach. We want to make these decisions, right? 2 underperforming years. We should fire the coach. I mean, if that were the philosophy, John Harbaugh wouldn't be the coach in Baltimore right now. If that were the philosophy, the Saints would have fired Sean Payton his first 2 years. Bill Belichick's first 6 seasons in the NFL, right? The greatest coach of all time. First 6 seasons in the NFL. 1 winning year. 1 winning season in the first 6 seasons as a head coach in the NFL. Took him till 94. Team got moved. We argued that year that he went 11-5 was a disappointment. You could have made a legitimate argument in 1994 when the Browns moved on from him that he was a fraud, right? But 94 and then 95 was the year that the team moved. My bad. That was a mistake there. But still, the point still remains is that it took 6 seasons for him to be good. And I'm not saying Kevin Stefanski is allowed to have 1 good year out of 6, but I think we do overreact in the moment to what the coach does and if the coach has it here, when a lot of this is player results based, right? Like a lot of this is based on what players do. Are players taking advantage of certain situations? And that doesn't mean that the coaching isn't responsible for it, but we act like the coaching matters more than the players on the field. It does not, right? Like, bad coaches win a ton of games all the time because they have good players. Like, you think Zach Taylor is one of the greatest coaches in the AFC right now, or you think he just has a really good team, right? Like, we weren't saying this about Zach Taylor 2 years ago when the roster was bad. Now we're saying it about Zach Taylor. What changed? The roster got better, right? This team just did not have success this year. A lot of guys underperformed. A lot of guys at key positions were bad. Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin, the offensive line in general wasn't the same as it's been in the last few years. The quarterback position the last 6 weeks kind of underperformed, right? Where Deshaun wasn't really giving you those statistical games that you wanted to get. If Deshaun plays better, if the offensive line plays better, and if Myles Garrett is Myles Garrett, this team's going to be really good next year, and we're going to be talking about, oh, well, Kevin really showed something, when it's just like it's the roster at the end of the day. And I think the reason why other teams are able to keep their coaches for a very long time is that they understand that the coaching staff is not going to be more important than what the roster is. So firing a bunch of coaches isn't really going to change your destiny. It's really just going to hinder it, because now you're changing what you're looking for on a consistent basis, and now it's making it harder to find good players. So if you have a coach that you feel like is competent at the end of the day, you need to keep him until, you feel like he is either incompetent or can't be listened to anymore. And I don't think it's gotten to that point with Kevin.
Yeah, and you brought up Bill Belichick. Kevin Stefanski's record the first 3 years with the Browns is better than Bill Belichick's first 3 with the Browns. Go ahead and look it up. It's better. All right, so NFL teams recently declared their unused cap space for 2022 and what they were going to roll over. No surprise, Browns have the most by a wide margin. They're rolling over $27.5 million. This is from the Bleacher Report. This is NFL teams that should target DeAndre Hopkins, and they say that the Browns are one of those teams that should, in fact, target DeAndre Hopkins. And they say, in his last season with Watson, Hopkins caught 104 passes for 1,165 yards, 7 touchdowns. Watson finished with 3,852 yards passing, 26 touchdowns, and a 98.0 passer rating. That's all well and good. The question is, do you have enough to go and get Hopkins? And I don't think the Browns do.
Well, I would put it like this. If you told, I don't know, let's say Deshaun Watson's up for a lot of money this year, right? You're like, hey, Deshaun, if you restructure, maybe we can get DeAndre Hopkins. I think he might be willing to restructure. You know what I mean? Like, there are ways to get around it, right? Is the whole point here, right? Now, I'm shocked that they didn't use Jack Conklin out. That could have been a way that you can get around it. But the fact is that this team invested 3 first-round picks into Deshaun Watson. That tells me everything I need to know about what their philosophy is this year, which is we're trying to win a Super Bowl, right? It doesn't mean that we have to win a Super Bowl, but they are trying to win a Super Bowl. When you're trying to win a Super Bowl, short-term things take precedent over long-term thinking. That doesn't mean you don't think about the long-term, but it does mean that the short-term is more important because you're trying to capitalize on a very finite window. So if that's the case, which it seems like it is, because, again, they traded 3 first-round picks and paid the quarterback, then that means that you're trying to win now. And DeAndre Hopkins, he would help you win now. Wouldn't be that expensive to trade for, to be honest, right? He wasn't that expensive when he got traded for previous. It was like a second and a fourth. Now he's 2 years older, coming off of a disappointing year and a PED suspension. You might not have to trade a ton of draft capital to get him. It might just be about the money, and the money can be figured out, right? The money is never a reason not to do something in the NFL. You can always figure that one out. You know what I mean? That's one that you can figure out. It's about want to at that point, and the Browns should have all the want to in the world.
All right, another name. Brandon Cooks had a 1,000-yard season with Deshaun Watson as one of his receivers in 2020. Made it clear he wants no part of being back with the rebuilding Houston Texans. Here's Brandon Cooks.
You said get my mind right. I mean, for me, my mind's not there. Rebuild, like I said, that window of where your gifts are at its peak only lasts for so long. So for me, I'm not looking at it as far as being a part of a rebuild. However that looks, that's where I trust my camp and my representation to be able to get a map from here and to there to see what that looks like, to be a part of something that's a trusted plan. But I'm not going into the offseason thinking like I'm I want to be a part of another rebuild like that.
Translation, I am getting out of Houston.
Yeah, I mean, 29 years old is no place to be, like, for a team that has the top number 2 pick in the draft, right? If you're any player of any caliber. I mean, this is around the time that where Joe Hayden had to get out of here, or where the Browns got Joe Hayden out of here at that age, right? So you only have so many, like, prime years of your career. He's in a similar conversation to DeAndre Hopkins, so where he's going to want out. Brandon Cook's going to want out. And there's probably going to be a couple more guys who become available that want out. And the Browns are definitely going to be in that market. I think Brandon Cooks is somebody that they're looking for. They want to get somebody who has some built-in chemistry with Deshaun Watson. That makes a ton of sense. So, yeah, I think Brandon Cooks, DeAndre Hopkins, both suitable options, even though I don't feel like they feel the same need. But, I mean, if you can get one of those two guys, if not both, why not both? You know what I mean? Why not? You can never have enough good wide receivers, right? We learned that from the Bengals. So, you know, if you could get both or one of them, like, you're doing well there. So, you know, you're adding to an already good group. And one of the things we saw was that this team had struggled to get wide receivers open in situations where they just had to go one-on-one, where teams were going to respect the pass. So you need more wide receivers.
All right, let me throw a couple of names of free agents at you, wide receivers that are due to be free agents. Let me know if you like any of them. You got Paris Campbell from the Colts, who's due to be a free agent. McCole Hardman from the Chiefs. Juju Smith-Schuster, also from the Chiefs, all due to be free agents. Any of those intrigue you?
I think DJ Shark might be on the list, and then McCole Hardman is definitely on that list, right? Like, fast guy. Returns kicks and punts sometimes too, you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't hurt. But Miko would be somebody who's interested in his price, though. The issue with the free agent market is that there's been such a boom in the last few years in wide receiver pay that I don't know what that does for mid-level guys, right? Like, I don't know if the mid-level has gone, like, up or if it stayed kind of constant. But you don't want to overpay for something new when you can get something used. It's kind of like when you got to replace your phone, where, like, you can get a new phone, but it's either going to be like $1,000 for a really good one, or you can get like a really bad new phone for like $300, or you can go in the used phone market, get a good phone from 2 years ago for the same price as that. Like, you see what I mean here, where the market's kind of at that place where you might have to go ahead and just get somebody who already has a contract, because that contract's going to be better than what you have to sign somebody new, because the market has kind of jumped up. So that might be something that they have to consider.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Reason for optimism for the Browns. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Do you guys think that the Browns have become the most hated team in the NFL after we traded for Deshaun Watson? I think it's utterly ridiculous that they are talking bad about this man. Also, who do you guys think will come back for the Browns? I think they can figure something out with Kareem Hunt, but other than that, I'm ready to see Jerome Ford. Kareem is getting a little old. I love Kareem Hunt, but I think he's a great guy, but we need to get younger. The whole trade Myles Garrett thing needs to stop, too. It's ridiculous. The main thing I think the Browns need to do is focus on getting themselves some wide receivers and linebackers, and I want Brian Flores as the head coach. I think he can set an aggressive attitude to that defense, get them rejuvenated. I think the Browns will be a good team next year, but that's my thoughts. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Quincy, I don't know that any of the guys that they're talking about leaving will come back. I don't think Kareem Hunt will be back. If they're going to go out and get a running back, I think it's going to be somebody that can catch the ball in space and kind of threaten the defense that way.
Yeah, there's going to be a change here on some of these positions of what they want from these positions. Like, even if Clowney, like, if that were still on the table, which not on the table anymore. Even if that were on the table, it would be very dependent on what they switched his defense to, because like a wide 9 might not fit him as well, right? If he only wants to rush the passer, as he said, stand there and rush the passer, you think he's going to want to do a 3-4 where you're going to have to drop out in coverage every once in a while? That's not what he's going to want to do. And it's probably not what he's going to do, right? Or even play 3-tech. So true 3-tech too, which is tough. So yeah, it's going to require some changes in and out. Running back changes. Look, we don't want to live in a world where we have to bruise teams to death to win. We want to be able to finesse it and create some chunk plays and throw the ball with the quarterback that we paid a lot of money for. So that's just the nature of that position is going to have to change. And like, you want somebody who's going to be a better pass protector than Kareem Hunt, because Kareem Hunt was pretty bad at it this year for whatever reason. So yeah, those are things you're going to want to look at when you have to take Nick Chubb off the field, because Nick Chubb's not a great third down back. And maybe Nick Chubb can develop into that this offseason. That would fix a lot of problems, to be honest, Dave, if he did. But if he cannot do that, then you need to have somebody as a third down back that's so good that people stop complaining about it. You know what I mean? When he gets taken off the field, right? Like, I think the last guy we had here that was like a true, real deal third down back was Duke Johnson. Obviously, Duke Johnson's not really like in his prime anymore. You don't want to have Duke Johnson on your roster right now, but somebody in that vein, right? That's a good route runner, good pass protector, and a solid runner in between the tackles when you have to run them.
All right, before we go to break, players that were the biggest disappointments this season, players that were the biggest surprises this season for you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were leading the break there
for
a second. But, yeah, my biggest disappointment this year would probably be, if I have to think about it, I would say Wyatt Teller. He's somebody who's usually in the top 5 range of guards. But unfortunately for him, he was like 17-ish, 20th. That's a massive drop from a player who was really good the year prior. And my biggest surprise would probably be either Grant Delpit or DPJ. I think they really outperformed what people expected of them in critical years. And I think, there's a lot of good things coming from those two young players.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll take a look at Kevin Stefanski, plus some things about Ethan Pocic. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Take a look at this. It puts things in perspective a little bit. 3 years prior to Kevin Stefanski, Browns were 13-34, no playoff wins. The 3 years since, Browns are 27-25, one playoff win. And again, I get it. It's been 2 years of underperforming. That's why the fan base is upset. The other thing, Quincy, that I would say is that 27-25 record is better than the first 3 years of Bill Belichick. I'm not saying Kevin Stefanski is going to be Bill Belichick. I'm saying let's see. I'm saying he's a young coach. Let's see.
Yeah, Kevin, like, it's funny, right? We talk about wanting the bar raised and all of this, and like, in a way it has, right? It was destitute, destructionally bad. And what did a lot of people used to say during that era? People forget. The most popular phrase was, I just want to be competitive. Right? Remember that, Dave? Everybody would say, we just want to be competitive. Well, we're competitive now. Now we want to be champions, right? That's kind of how this thing works, right? You keep wanting to move up the ladder, right? So Kevin has done a good job getting this team to a certain place. They have stalled out a little bit. I mean, the reasons why they've stalled out are not like crazy. Last year, quarterback of questionable quality, then also gets injured on top of that, plays really bad, really has the season tank because of that. This year, you have a weird situation where a guy gets suspended for 11 games, and he's a new quarterback that you just traded for, and then he comes back, doesn't really play well. It doesn't really matter because you're not really in the playoff hunt at that point anyways. And then on top of that, everything that happened with the defense. Now, next year, you got to put up numbers, right? Like you got to produce if you're Kevin, because one, it's the end of his contract, so it's literally a contract year for him. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it's at least close to it. And two, like the expectations are super high for the team next year. You got to make the playoffs next year. So, yeah, they've done a good job. They're at a certain place. Well, they've done an all right job. I don't want to say good because then people are gonna get mad at me or mediocre, all this stuff. I get in my mentions all the time. But I would say they've done a decent job of being better than what they have. But next year is where they got to start making strides to, instead of being envious of Cincinnati, right, of where they're at, we need to compete. And that's just where it is.
Yeah. And again, conventional wisdom says it's tougher to get from that mediocre stage to being a consistent playoff team than it is getting from the bottom dweller to mediocre. Bottom dweller to mediocre easier than mediocre to playoff team, and that's kind of where the Browns are. They're trying to get.
It's easy to be good at football at high school, right? But being good at football in college is much harder than being good at football in high school. And then being good at football in the NFL, much, much harder, right? It is less work you have to do. Well, not less work. It's less stuff on the basis, right? Because when you learn the game in high school, you learn everything. But it's the fine details of things, and it is that the margin of error becomes that much thinner as you keep going up those rungs. So it's not as simple as like, well, this guy, he went from this to that. It's like, hey, once you hit that part of, okay, now you have playoff expectations every year. Now you need to be Super Bowl contender. And then when you get to Super Bowl contender, you need to go to where very few teams have ever gotten in the NFL, which is dynasty, right? Like that's where you're trying to get to. Even the Chiefs haven't broken that ceiling yet. And they're the Chiefs, right? They're the team that we unilaterally say, oh, that's what you want to be. The Chiefs. They're not even there yet. So it takes a while. I mean, culture, we talk about culture like we're just going to sign the right players here and there, and they're going to make powerful speeches in the locker room, and that's just going to fix everything. Culture takes years to develop, right? Even at a college program where this thing kind of microwave because you're moving players in and out every 4 years, it still takes forever at that level. In the NFL, it takes forever. It takes consistent winning, years of consistent winning, years of consistency in the building, years of continuity in order to build this culture. So people who want culture have to understand you can't keep firing everybody if you want culture, because there needs to be some level of consistency there. There needs to be some level of stability there in order to build that. So, we keep looking at Baltimore and Pittsburgh and saying, look how nice their house is. And we keep trying to rebuild our foundation, but they've had that house built for 20 years. We want it done like right now. It's going to take a while to get to that point.
All right, let's take a look at Ethan Pocic, center that filled in when Nick Harris got injured, and he is outstanding. So, obviously a candidate for the Browns to re-sign. You see run blocking grade 79.2, pass blocking a little under that at 71.5. But take a look at that. Nick Chubb's yards per carry with Pocic, 5.6. Without him, 3.78. Very rarely do you say, boy, is a center key to our run game. Pocic was pretty key to the Browns' run game this season.
He went out at an interesting time, too, though, where, he came back and the line was still bad, and he was in there and the line was kind of bad. It's I don't know how much of that is just Ethan, but he was a good player in that role, and obviously having a good player in that role helps. I would like to point out the obvious point of, oh, man, is Nick Chubb being carried by Ethan Pocic? Can we just release Nick Chubb? You know what I mean? No, I'm kidding there. But, that's why sometimes I tend to take correlation stats a little bit with a grain of salt, because you wouldn't cut Nick Chubb because you're like, oh, well, we can get the same production with anybody behind Ethan Pocic. And the same thing goes the other way around, which is I don't think Ethan's really creating that production for Nick. I think Nick was creating some of his own problems, to be honest, in the middle of this season. So a little bit of both. Either way, he's a really good center. He's somebody the Browns have to think about bringing back. It's going to be interesting because Nick Harris is also in the last year of his deal. So we'll see.
All right, Browns obviously have to upgrade the defense. Which positions do you think they need to go outside and get? Which would you prioritize? Which do you think they can kind of work around and fix either with scheme or who they have internally?
Every single person they're bringing in the interview is somebody who has had a noted emphasis on the front four. Right, like that's somebody that, whether we're talking about Brian Flores and blitzing, Gerard Mayo and blitzing, or even Jim Schwartz in his front fours, right? He's famous for the Ndamukong Suh, Nick Fairley, Detroit Lions, right? Two strong three techs. He even went to the Super Bowl, won the Super Bowl as the defensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles, I believe in 2017, and that was a team anchored by its strong defensive line. So I think that's going to be priority number one, is the defensive line play. How do we get better defensive line play? How do we get more guys in there? It's not just about filling out the depth chart, right? Yeah, you need to get somebody to put next to Perrion Winfrey to be a starter. I would love a DeForest Buckner in that role. Yeah, you need to get somebody to start opposite edge, but you also need to have rotational guys that you can bring in for certain packages, right? Remember how nice it was to have Tack McKinley come in there for that little Tack McKinley package, and then you could run some blitzes, some specialized blitzes off of that? You need to have more stuff like that in here. So it's not about just filling some needs here on the depth chart. It's about also being able to have a legitimate toolbox that you can go to with that defensive line, being able to have tricks and different things that you can roll out, guys that can be in different situational positions so you can have better designs for these blitzes to force some one-on-ones from Myles Garrett. Again, I said this a couple weeks ago, I'll say it again. The goal of the offseason should be how to get Myles Garrett to not be number one in double team rate next year.
Fair enough. Quincy Carrier, always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
No problem. Thank you, Dave.
All right, Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Untitled, unfiltered Browns coverage, always really good. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter from The Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, straight ahead. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yeah, hi, this is Ron from Cleveland. And just wanted to call in and kind of ask you guys, why do you think we're keeping Kevin Stefanski as head coach? He hasn't shown me anything that would separate him from any other team that finishes in the last place. And if you want to see a good coach, look no further than the team I hate the most in the world is the Pittsburgh Steelers. There is absolutely no way that their roster should have finished in front of our roster. For God's sake, they got a cast-off quarterback and a rookie quarterback, and they're beating us. I have nothing against Kevin Stefanski as a person. Very articulate man, obviously very well read. He's just a good offensive coordinator and not a very good head coach. I'm sure a lot of people disagree, maybe not at this point since we can't seem to get out of last place, but hopefully somebody will see the light here in the near future, especially if we bomb again next year. I just want to see them win. It just comes down to that. Hey, best of the day to you guys. Love your show. Love the Cleveland Browns with all my heart. Go Cleveland. Woof.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter from Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Ashley, I want to point out one reason that Mike Tomlin is a good coach is their stability. Since the 1960s, the Pittsburgh Steelers have had 3 head coaches: Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. They don't change head coaches when they have a down year. Well, they don't have many down years, but and again, I get it. It's been 2 disappointing seasons in a row, and the fan base is becoming more divided on Kevin Stefanski. I don't think he should have been let go just yet. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't either. And I think the bottom line is the Browns have to give him a chance to call plays for Deshaun Watson for a full season and show that he can run this offense. You know, Deshaun Watson has been very honest that Kevin Stefanski was a big part of the reason he chose to come to the Browns out of all the teams that were pursuing him because of the meeting they had before he agreed to be traded here. I do think that looking at his trajectory, like obviously you have the Coach of the Year win in his first year, but this is very much a what have you done for me lately kind of league, which is fair. But I do think given all of the turmoil he's dealt with the last 2 years, he deserves a chance this season to see what he can do. And I definitely think when we go into next season, I think for me, it's almost like going into next season, the way we talked about Joe Woods this year is going to kind of be how we talk about Kevin Stefanski next year. Like after 2023, I mean, 2023 to me is really his chance to prove that he can work with Deshaun Watson, because I think the reality of the situation is when you pay a quarterback $230 million, that is that quarterback's team now. So it's all about working with Deshaun Watson and showing you can win with him.
Yeah, and it's going to look different. They're going to you don't pay a quarterback $230 million to be a run-oriented team. That would be insane.
Yeah, and I think that's this interesting dichotomy because of how the Browns were built up until this point. Like they were built to run the football. They have 2 of the highest paid pulling guards in the NFL. They obviously have Nick Chubb. Like that's what this team still can run. But, I think it's going to be an adjustment for fans, especially these fans who want to see Nick Chubb get the ball 20 plus times a game, which to be fair, that's never really been how this Kevin Stefanski offense has operated, but things are definitely going to look different. And I really think for me, these last 6 games this season were basically like an extended preseason of sorts. I kind of felt like the Browns were out of playoffs. We talked about this on our Orange and Brown Talk podcast. The turning point for me was that loss to Miami. It just felt like this was going to be another lost season. So I think I kind of looked at it like preseason and what can they get to work in this system with Deshaun as quarterback. And next year is the time to prove that with him available for all 17 games that you can win with him and make a playoff push.
Yeah, and again, there will be some pressure to win, and there should be pressure to win next season on Kevin Stefanski and the Browns. This is interesting. Pro Football Focus, 4th down decision-making chart. And that blue is when you go for it. The green is punt and the red is field goal. What that tells you is the Browns went for it on 4th down the most ahead of the Lions, Cardinals, Packers, and the Eagles. So the Eagles, who are one of the favorites, top seed in the NFC, went for it almost as much on fourth down as the Browns. And again, that's another hot button topic for the fan bases, going for it on fourth down. That could change as well, just based on a quick strike offense. You may not feel, you may be able to, we can get back down in the red zone quicker. So all those things factor into decisions on fourth down.
Yeah, and I think especially this season when they were going for it on fourth down, what were a lot of those plays? They were Jacoby Brissett sneaks on those fourth and short situations. And those worked more often than they didn't. I mean, I know the Browns missed a lot of these fourth down attempts, and it drove fans kind of crazy, including that one where they had the field goal and actually took points off the board against Washington, went for it on fourth down and didn't get it. But I do think like playing with Jacoby Brissett had a lot to do with that. Number one, he's big. He's like 6'4". He basically just has to fall forward to get a first down if you're in a fourth and short situation. But also because they weren't scoring a lot of points. Jacoby Brissett had fewer than like 10 touchdowns, I think, in his time as a starter. So they weren't, like you're saying, Dave, getting into those scoring situations. And I think with Deshaun, that does change. But given how their offense looked this year, I think when you look at it, it's kind of easy to understand analytically why the analytics were telling them, hey, it's better to go for it here. You might get more bang for your buck.
All right. So the defensive coordinators, we know that Jim Schwartz was in yesterday. We know that Brian Flores was in today. Gerard Mayo may get a head coaching interview in Carolina. We'll see if he comes back here and does that. And Sean Desai is the other one. Of those four that we know, who do you think's the best fit? Do you have a feel for that, or?
Yeah, you know, I feel like there are a couple guys we know the most about, and it's Jim Schwartz and Brian Flores for me. But I'm going to go with Jim Schwartz just because of what I feel like this defense needs. Like, you need, I think, a guy who's been around, who kind of has that authority to him, because, you know, we saw this defense not only had systemic breakdowns throughout the year, but discipline issues. You know, there were like 4 or 5 cases of players being disciplined this year. I think John Johnson III on Monday, when it was locker cleanout day and he talked to us, he mentioned getting a guy who players would run through a wall for. Now, on that note, I think if you could get Gerard Mayo to come here, if he doesn't get a head coaching job, that is like the prime example, I think, of a coach that players would be willing to run through a wall for, because he's been in their shoes before, and it seems like everyone who's played for him really likes him. So right now, you know, it's tough to say, but I think overall, like Jim Schwartz, like having that gravitas kind of in that role, I think is important for this team right now because of like the personalities of the leaders on this team. You got a lot of quieter guys. I mean, I would even include Kevin Stefanski in that. So I overall just think I'm leaning towards that direction right now. But, you know, curious to see how the rest of these interviews go. And like you said, if Gerard Mayo even ends up, you know, getting an interview, or if the head coaching thing for him ends up panning out elsewhere.
Yeah, and you almost need to, it's like when you mess up on defense, you want this defensive coordinator, you want the players to feel like they're going into the principal's office, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. The accountability. I know you wrote an article on Sione Takitaki, his rehab from ACL. Take us through that, what you found out about that.
Yeah, so Sione talked to us on Monday in the locker room. You know, he's on crutches, he's rehabbing. He said his rehab is going well. He put himself about 10 months out from surgery date to when he would be able to return, which puts him around a mid-October return to the field, because he did have surgery in mid-December. But, you know, he is a guy who's heading towards free agency and just made it clear that he would really like to stay here. He said he's let the team know that. He's made his feelings known. And I think for him, you know, he even realizes he was playing so well, he probably, with getting hurt, left millions on the table off of a potential contract, which, of course, given the NFL, that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. But, you know, Sione Takitaki has always been a guy who's been really good against the run. I don't think you can afford to lose that right now, given the situation that you're in with your run defense. And he's also proven that he can be an every down backer. You know, he really wasn't that before. He tied a career high in defensive snaps this year, and I believe he played the same number in 2020, but he didn't obviously play in every game this year. He missed the final 5 in their entirety. So I do just think that he really wants to come back here. I think he was a positive force on this defense. The way you hear the coaches and players rave about him, his locker room presence, I think it'd be really important to bring him back on this defense to try to help fix some of these areas that they really struggled with.
He certainly had his best year with the Browns this season. Ashley Bastock and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we will continue talking Browns. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Ashley Bastock from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's take a look. Browns 2022 PFF grade. So offense tied for 9th. Defense 27th. There's only 32 teams in the NFL. Special teams 19th, and overall tied for 16th. And Ashley, I don't know any other way to say it. The defense was disappointing. We thought it was going to be a top 10, maybe even a top 5 defense, and it ends up being bottom 5, bottom 6.
Yeah, especially because they finished as a top 5 defense last season, despite some early struggles, much like this year. But I think everyone, myself included, kind of thought that this would carry over. I think even players and the coaches thought that to some extent. You know, a lot of those guys were so new last year. They didn't have a normal offseason because the COVID regulations or restrictions were still happening, still in place. And I think everyone just said, hey, it's going to be, for a lot of them, their second year in Joe Woods' system. They've gotten to play together a lot more than they did coming into last season. And you just did not see that translate at all. I think we always joke about it in the offseason on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. We did a draft where we drafted the position groups on the Browns who you thought was best. And I took the cornerbacks first overall because I was like, you know what? Positional value, these guys are set to go. And of course, we did not see any of that come to fruition. I think a lot of these guys who are younger, who the team thought had developed, very well in the offseason, they didn't make that big second or third year jump you expect from your younger guys. So I definitely think they have to look at just about everything, including personnel on this defense, and see if there's not better options out there for them, considering we talk about it all the time, like their window to win is now, and these windows in the NFL don't stay open very long.
Another thing that you've written about, a young guy that really did have a quote-unquote breakout year, Donovan Peoples-Jones, becomes eligible for an extension. What'd you find out? Take us through what you learned talking to DPJ.
Yeah, Donovan, I talked to him last week and explained, I wanted to kind of bank this story on his extension before it kind of becomes the hot topic of discussion and what the Browns are going to do with him. And he wouldn't quite take the bait when I asked him explicitly, like, hey, do you want an extension? But I reframed the question a little bit and said, hey, well, how much do you like being on this team and in Cleveland? And he said he loves Cleveland, that it feels like home. I think that's understandable considering he's a Detroit kid, obviously not from too far away. I think the two cities have a lot in common, but he said, he would love to stay here, that he thinks he's been really lucky getting to learn from some of the other players he's gotten to learn from so far. I mean, he came to an NFL team that had two of his idols on it in Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. And regardless of how those tenures ended, both of those guys are very giving vets, I think, and teach these young guys a lot. So he picked up a lot from them. Now he has Amari Cooper, one of the best route runners in the NFL. And Deshaun Watson is far and away the best quarterback he's ever had throwing him the football. And I think what meshes them so well together is DPJ is so good at contested catches, and Deshaun likes to throw guys open. So those two skill sets, I think, just work really well together. I think it's only a matter of when and how much money his extension is going to be worth, because the Browns would be crazy not to do that, let's be honest.
Yeah, I would agree. And, they're going to play more 3 wide receivers, so you're going to need more wide receivers. Along those lines, I think we've talked, I know Mary Kay said it, I think you've said it on the show as well. They need to add another wide receiver. What skill set do you think in that wide receiver would best move this offense towards being elite?
Yeah, I know Mary Kay has also used this term, but, it's almost like a poor man's Tyreek Hill. You need like a speedy guy, maybe a guy who's not afraid of contact, a true slot guy, I think. David Bell still has potential, but he's not fast. He actually had some issues catching the ball later in the season, which was surprising because his hands are one of his best traits. But I do think you're just missing that speedy guy who can just beat people. And I think the Browns kind of wanted Anthony Schwartz to be that. And of course, these last 2 seasons, him with injuries and his development haven't quite panned out. But I do think you need to get like a veteran guy like that in this room to kind of give your offense something different.
Yeah, I would agree. Not only deep, but you get the ball to him in open space and the defense goes, that's a problem.
Yeah. And you watch Tyreek Hill play, like it's not, the Browns talked about this before they played the Dolphins. It's not like those deep balls that kill you. It's like the yards after the catch a lot of the times. And the Browns don't really have anybody like that. I mean, Amari Cooper, you've seen that from him, but he's more known for his route running and getting open. So I do think that would just add a different dynamic to this offense if they can go out and get that.
Agree with you wholeheartedly. Ashley Bastock, as always, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Ashley.
Thanks.
Ashley Bastock. Make sure you check him out. Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Always really good stuff. And that's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.